Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a time machine set to way too early. You find yourself in a damp, smoky wooden room that smells faintly of hay, feet, and desperation. There's no snooze button. No soft memory foam pillow. No cozy pajama pants or Spotify playlist called Slow Morning Forest Rain. Nope. It's the year 1326, and you're about to experience a medieval morning routine in all its itchy, uncomfortable glory. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? I love seeing the range of sleepy friends all around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stir to the clattering clang of a church bell miles away. It's loud, persistent, and ringing out over misty fields. That sound. That's your medieval alarm clock. It means dawn is here. And so are your obligations. Whether you're a farmhand, a merchant, or an underpaid monastery scribe, your day begins now, and the sun doesn't care how cozy your straw mattress was. Speaking of which, let's talk about that mattress. If you were lucky, it was a lumpy sack filled with straw or hay, tied at the ends with string. If you were unlucky, it had some mouse tenants. You slept in your undertunic, probably still wearing yesterday's crusted socks. And no, you didn't change into fresh sheets, they didn't exist. You push yourself up and immediately feel the itch in your back. Sleeping on straw over wooden planks isn't exactly orthopedic, but at least you're inside. Many medieval people, servants, apprentices, stable boys slept in barns, kitchens, or just next to whatever hearth hadn't gone cold. Some even curled up in corners of great halls after feasts, using their cloaks as blankets and someone's leftover turnip as a pillow. Outside, the roosters start crowing like they've just discovered caffeine. Inside, your room is freezing. No insulation, just wind slipping through wattle and daub walls. You can see your breath. And the window. A small opening with cloth soaked in lard or paper instead of glass. You wipe off some moisture with your sleeve and try not to think about how much colder it's going to get in February. This is the first indignity of the day, waking up already uncomfortable. Your limbs are stiff, your joints creak, and your nose is running. The sun hasn't even fully risen, and yet the village is slowly animating clinking pots, barking dogs, coughing neighbors. The rhythm of life is dictated by the sun and the sound of bells from the local abbey. See, the Benedictine monks popularized the bell system for marking the canonical hours. Those are the holy times of prayer spaced throughout the day. Maidens, or nighttime prayer, could be as early as 2 or 3 a.m. in some communities, followed by lauds at sunrise. Historians still argue whether most villagers follow these prayers strictly or just let the monks handle the divine early shifts. Either way, that bell is your cue. You swing your legs over the bed, grimace as your bare feet hit the freezing ground, and start another day in the long, slow, and slightly mildew-scented tradition of medieval life. You're not alone, by the way. Some mornings, you might be sharing your sleeping space with family members, apprentices, or even farm animals. Privacy wasn't a thing unless you were nobility, and even then, not great privacy. Let's just say there were more curtains and fewer walls. Fun fact, some wealthier households owned warming pans, thin metal trays filled with coals that were swished between the sheets before bedtime. But if you weren't careful, those things caught fire. So yes, even medieval comfort came with risk. As you reach for your overtunic, a roughly woven thing that smells like sheep, you spot a spider climbing across the ceiling beam. That's normal. Bugs were just part of the package. Cleanliness was a concept more spiritual than physical at this hour. You sigh, already dreading what comes next, the morning ritual of survival. Which, sadly, involves everything but coffee. You shuffle forward, your feet landing on the cold stone floor like reluctant hooves. Every step is a grim little negotiation between you and frostbite. There are no slippers, no heated tiles, no gentle voice from a smart speaker reminding you to hydrate and stretch. Just a dull itch in your ankles and the quiet, existential groan of realizing this is your life now. The medieval floor is not your friend. In wealthier homes, it might be made of stone or tightly packed clay, sometimes scattered with rushes, dried grass, or herbs to catch dirt, crumbs, and bodily fluids. These rushes were changed. Rarely. Historians still argue whether rushes were swapped seasonally, monthly, or only when the mice population got out of hand and demanded rights. As for you, you're lucky to have anything underfoot that isn't just damp, or you reach for your clothes more accurately, you fumble for whatever's still dry from yesterday. There is no concept of pajamas. You slept in what you wore, and what you wore was what you own. Most medieval folks had 2 outfits total, one to wear, and one to desperately scrub in a freezing stream once a week if you were feeling spicy. And socks. Don't even start. If they existed, they were scratchy wool tubes that retained moisture like emotional baggage. You pull your tunic over your head, managing to poke only one eye in the process. It smells faintly of smoke and sour ale. You tie a belt probably made of rope or leather around your waist, muttering under your breath as your fingers go numb. Fasteners were rare, Buttons were expensive little miracles. Everything was tied, looped, or pinned. Dressing was less getting ready and more completing a puzzle you forgot how to solve. The wind whistles through the walls. There's a moment where you can see your breath cloudy and dramatic and it makes you wish, just briefly, that you could time travel back forward. You glance longingly toward the hearth, which is long gone cold. Someone will need to rekindle it, but not yet. That's an after-prayer problem. And don't even think about a mirror. Glass mirrors were rare and mostly for the wealthy, and polished metal wasn't exactly known for giving confidence-boosting reflections. Instead, you judge your appearance by feeling your hair and hoping for the best. There's a bit of hay stuck behind your ear. Typical. If you're a peasant, you probably share this small room with other family member siblings, parents, maybe a grumpy aunt. There are no doors between your sleeping space and the main room, so modesty is a suggestion, not a guarantee. The temperature outside is somewhere between stabby wind and permafrost socks. If it's winter, you dread the fact that the stream you wash in will be frozen. If it's summer, you dread the bugs. There's never really a winning season. Medieval homes weren't designed for comfort, they were designed for bare survival, and not much else. You reach for your boots, which are hard and damp. They're made of leather, stiff from the cold, and missing any sort of support. Lacing them up feels like preparing for a battle against your own arches. Fun fact, shoe soles were often made of a single piece of leather, and you could feel everything through them. A pebble becomes a betrayal. A twig becomes a death wish. And just when you think you've reached the lowest point of your morning, a rat scurries past your foot. You freeze. It freezes. There's a silent standoff and it disappears into a crack in the wall like it pays rent. You exhale slowly. Maybe today won't be the day you lose your mind. At this hour, your stomach is already grumbling, your joints are already protesting, and you've already stepped on something suspiciously. Phooey. But there's no time to sit and wallow. Morning in the medieval world is relentless, and the real indignities haven't even started yet. You hear more bell seas from the chapel now signaling that prayer time is coming. And guess what? That's mandatory. Doesn't matter if your fingers are still thawing or your nose is about to fall off. You've got God to thank for waking you up, even if you're not entirely sure you're glad about it. But don't worry. Before divine grace, you've got one more hurdle, navigating the world's least welcoming toilet. You shuffle toward the door with the gait of someone headed to their own execution. Because in a way, you are. The medieval toilet, more politely known as the privy, is not just a facility. It's a test of endurance, luck, and your ability to hold your breath longer than you thought humanly possible. Depending on where you live, your morning bathroom options range from bad to worse. If you're in a rural village, there's likely a small, wooden shack out back, perched precariously over a pit. No plumbing. No seat warmer. No scented candles. Just a hole cut into a wooden plank, and beneath that, a pungent abyss that's been fermenting for months. The door doesn't close right, so wind sneaks in and the smell sneaks out forever. You step inside, and immediately regret everything. Your nose wrinkles. Your eyes water. The stench is a symphony of horror, human waste, mildew, and something unidentifiably fishy. You decide not to investigate. You sit, or rather, you hover and pray for balance, and you go about your business as quickly as the cold will allow. Historians still argue whether people used moss, straw, or scraps of cloth for wiping. None of the options are good. If you're nobility, you might have access to linen rags or even imported wool scraps. But you get whatever's dry and vaguely absorbent. Some communities even use shells. Yes, shells. Let that sink in. And don't forget to check for rats, snakes, or that occasional frog. Medieval privies were not picky about their tenants. If you lived in a castle, you might have a slightly fancier setup. A garderobe, basically a stone protrusion from the castle wall with a hole that dropped waist down into the moat. But that just meant your bathroom was windier and had better views of your own excrement floating past. Royalty, everyone. Back in your humble hut, you finish up and step outside, feeling like you've survived a small battle. Your cheeks are red, your toes are frozen, and your soul is slightly bruised. Oh, and let's not forget, hand washing is optional. Soap exists, but it's rare, smelly, and made from animal fat and lye. It burns your skin if not mixed right. Most people just rinse their hands in the same bucket everyone else uses, filled with gray water and mystery particles. You give your fingers a splash and hope the germs fear your immune system. There's no hand sanitizer. No antibacterial anything. Just a vague hope that exposure to everything all the time will somehow make you stronger. Spoiler, it won't. Now, back indoors, you're not exactly feeling fresh. But no one expects you to. Personal hygiene in the medieval morning was, let's call it, theoretical. People believed bad smells caused illness, so ironically, some thought washing too much was danger as it opened your pores and let disease in. Better to stay dusty and safe. That said, monasteries were surprisingly clean. Monks often bathed weekly, luxurious by medieval standards, and had better designed latrines, sometimes with running water from nearby streams. Some even had rudimentary plumbing, with stone channels for drainage. Fancy, but even they had to brave the early morning chill. Imagine kneeling in cold stone corridors before sunrise, whispering psalms while your stomach growls and your toes go numb. Peaceful. In a penitential, bone-itching way. For now, you've made it through your medieval toilet trip, and somehow your dignity is still clinging to life. But the date isn't going to wait for you to compose yourself. Outside, smoke is rising from chimneys, dogs are barking again, and somewhere, someone is already yelling at a cow. You take a deep breath not through your nose and prepare for what comes next. Attempting to clean yourself, medieval style. You trudge back inside, cheeks stunned by the cold, and the first thing you notice besides your lingering trauma from the privy is the morning wash bucket. It sits by the hearth, which, unfortunately, is still cold. The water inside it might have once been room temperature, but now it's somewhere between glacier runoff and ice dagger. Still, you're expected to wash your face. There's no soap, no warm towel, and certainly no facial cleanser. You kneel beside the bucket and splash a handful of icy water onto your cheeks. It stings. You suck in a sharp breath through your teeth. Congratulations, no, you're clean. Apparently. Medieval cleanliness wasn't about squeaky skin or minty freshness. It was symbolic. Splashing your face and hands in the morning was more a ritual of routine than actual sanitation. And don't expect a toothbrush, either. You reach for a frayed toigias, a twig, and start rubbing it against your teeth in small, hopeful circles. In some areas, people used aromatic herbs like sage or mint to freshen breath. The wealthier might chew fennel seeds or use cloths dipped in wine or vinegar to scrub their teeth. Historians still argue whether this was effective dental hygiene or just medieval aromatherapy. Either way, tooth decay was rampant, and dentists were usually blacksmiths on their day off. As for your hair, well, let's be generous and call it textured. You use a carved wooden comb to drag through the tangles, occasionally pausing to remove a curious flea. Medieval people were very familiar with lice, and delousing was a group activity. Some families made a morning ritual of it, like monkeys grooming each other but with worse lighting. Shampoo? No such thing. Some folks washed their hair with fermented rye water or even diluted ashes. If that sounds awful, it's because it was. But they didn't do it often, once a month, maybe. Water was cold, baths were rare, and clean hair was considered suspicious in some circles. You were either holy or hiding something. Still, you persist. You splash. You scrub. You sniff your armpits and decide they're technically still human. Then you reach for your headwear. Yes, the morning bonnet. If you're a woman, you cover your hair with a wimple or coif, a kind of lion wrap that screams, "I haven't felt the back of my neck in 11 years. If you're a man, you might wear a felt cap or hood, especially in winter. Hair was rarely left uncovered unless you were trying to scandalize the livestock. Now comes the part where you inspect your body for sores, boils, or bruises. Not because you're vain, but because any infection could escalate fast. There's no Neosporin. Just poultices made from bread, goose fat, or herbs someone found growing by a ditch. You examine a suspicious bite on your leg, and pray it's not from a spider with ideas. At this point, you might be wondering, why didn't people bathe more? Well, some did. Public bathhouses were popular in cities during the early medieval period. But by the late Middle Ages, especially after the Black Death, people grew wary of public bathing. Some feared hot water opened the pores to disease. Others just didn't enjoy the experience of bathing next to their neighbor's cousin and 5 other sweaty strangers. Still, not all hope is lost. Monasteries had the best hygiene standards of the time. Monks were encouraged to wash before prayers, and many cloisters had running water from aqueducts or spring-fed channels. You, however, are not a monk. You're just trying to remove a splinter from your toe without making eye contact with the family chicken watching you from the corner. You sigh. You splash your face one more time, and you tell yourself that at least you're awake now. Your skin is red. Your teeth are slightly cleaner. Your hair is mostly under control. And you've won the daily battle against fleas for now. Outside, the bells ring again. It's time to talk to God. You pull your wool cloak tighter, which does little except trap in last night's body heat and the lingering scent of turnip stew. Outside, the village is stirring. The bell tolls again, 3 short chimes this time. That's your cue. It's time to pray. Not in the comfort of your home, mind you. No meditative music, no candlelit solitude. You kneel. On the cold floor. With your knees on rough wood or packed earth, depending on your station. If you're devout, or just scared of being labeled sinful before breakfast, you mutter your morning prayers aloud. For monks and clergy, this part of the day is highly structured. The divine office begins with lauds, a series of psalms and readings chanted together. If you're in a monastery, you're already in the chapel, wrapped in layers, bleary-eyed, chanting in Latin before the sun crests the horizon. The acoustics are beautiful. The draft, less so. But you're not a monk, are you? You're a villager, maybe a baker, or a washerwoman, or a thatcher's apprentice with crusty eyelids and a sore thumb. Your version of lauds is a quick cross and a whispered pater noster before getting on with survival. You kneel by your bed or straw pile and mumble a mixture of devotion and half-frozen vowels. Some households have a small wooden crucifix on the wall. Others keep a painted saint card tucked into the rafters. You might whisper a prayer to Saint Apollonia for your toothache, or Saint Leonard if you're afraid of being kidnapped by bandits. That was a real fear. Historians still argue whether daily prayer routines were strictly followed by commoners or loosely interpreted. Some say peasants followed a rhythm shaped more by agricultural demands than liturgical schedules. Others believe the church's influence was so embedded in daily life that even the poorest peasants performed morning devotions out of reflex. One thing's clear, your first coherent thought of the day isn't about breakfast. It's about repentance, gratitude, fear, and maybe a low-key complaint about your neighbor's rooster. You mutter your last amen and glance up at the thatched ceiling, hoping today doesn't involve anyone dying of spoiled barley or getting trampled by a cart. You're not optimistic. If you happen to live in a larger village or near a castle, you might attend a small morning mass in a stone chapel. The benches are hard, the incense is thick, and the priest's voice echoes dramatically off the cold walls. You can't feel your fingers, but at least your soul is theoretically safe. Outside, dawn is breaking. The sky turns from inky blue to pale gray, then blushes with frostbitten pinks. A low fog creeps across the ground, swallowing fences and hoofprints. You pull your hood over your ears and stand. It's time to move on. Prayer done. Guilt acknowledged. Chill absorbed. Now what? Now comes the joy of breakfast. Sort of. But first, a moment of silence for your itching knees. Before you head to the food, if it can be called that, you give your tunic a tug and your belt a cinch. Nothing says ready for labor like being semi-clean, semi-awake, and spiritually anxious. You step outside and are greeted by the sharp scent of burning peat and wet earth. Someone nearby is already hauling firewood. Someone else is arguing with a mule. And a child runs by barefoot, shrieking about a missing shoe. Good morning, medieval world. You step into the chilly morning air, the kind that bites at your cheeks and numbs your fingers before you've had a chance to complain. The village is coming alive, but it's a slow, groggy kind of awakening, much like you, only with more animals and less hope. Your breath billows in front of you as you make your way toward the hearth, where the day's first meal was prepared. Breakfast in medieval times, if you can call it that, is a far cry from the modern spread of eggs, bacon, and avocado toast you might be dreaming of. Instead, it's usually a modest chunk of rye bread, often stale, and a cup of ale, watered down so heavily it barely qualifies as a beverage. No coffee, no tea, no fancy latte art. Ale was common because water sources were often contaminated, and the brewing process killed harmful microbes. Historians still argue whether early medieval ale was closer to modern beer or a sort of cloudy, sour cider. Either way, it was a staple. Even children drank it, albeit in smaller amounts. A surprising number of modern diets owe their stability to fermented drinks. You bite into your bread, which is dense and crumbly. It's probably been baked days ago by a local baker who wakes up even earlier than you. The bread has little flavor beyond gritty and possibly harboring insects. It's filling, though, which is the point. You swallow the dry crust and take a small sip from your all cup, wincing as the sourness hits your tongue. If you're lucky, breakfast includes some cheese or leftover pottage, a thick stew made from grains, vegetables, and maybe a bit of meat if the family is well off or feeling generous. Meat was rare, and usually saved for special occasions or the nobility. Speaking of nobility, their breakfasts were a whole other kingdom of complications. They might enjoy spiced wine, fresh fruit, and eggs, but their mornings started with layers of complicated rituals including bathing, which you can probably only dream of. Their food was delicious, but their hygiene questionable. Back in your cottage, the chickens are squawking outside, eyeing your loaf like it's their birthright. You throw a few crumbs their way, hoping to avoid a poultry uprising. The smell of smoke from nearby hearths mingles with the damp earth, and the faint scent of herbs drying in bunches. Rosemary, thyme, and lavender might hang from the rafters, offering a mild olfactory defense against the omnipresent musk of unwashed bodies and livestock. Your neighbors emerge from their homes, rubbing sleep from their eyes, ready to tackle the day's chores. Some children run barefoot through muddy lanes, their latter raining despite the cold and hardship. As you chew your bread, you remember the communal ovens that many villages had. Baking bread was often a weekly event, with villagers bringing their duff to be cooked in a shared oven. This meant timing was everything. Miss your slot, and you're stuck eating cold, hard bread or worse, none at all. Breakfast isn't a time for leisure, it's a brief refueling before hours of back-breaking work in the fields, workshops, or homes. Still, this humble meal connects you to a cycle as old as civilization itself. It's nourishment and routine, a small comfort in a world where comfort is scarce. You finish your bread, wash your hands in the cold water again, probably the same bucket from before, and prepare to face the rest of the day. Outside, the sun climbs higher, and the bells ring once more, signaling the next phase of your relentless medieval morning. The bells peal again, a constant soundtrack to your day, somewhere between a spiritual reminder and a medieval version of a boss fight countdown. For you, this means time to move on to your daily work. If you're a monk, that means chanting psalms and copying manuscripts in the scriptorium. If you're a farmer, it means trudging out to the fields before the sun's warmth is fully spread. If you're an apprentice, it's yelling over the din of clanging hammers and barking dogs. Monks start early, often before dawn, with maidens a lengthy service of prayers and psalms in near darkness. They chant in unison, their voices rising and falling like waves in a cold sea. These rituals enforce discipline and devotion, but you might wonder, did they ever sneak in a nap afterward? Historians still argue whether monastic routines were as strict or as merciful as tradition suggests. Outside the monastery walls, the village pulses with different rhythms. Market stalls are being set up, livestock herded, and children sent off to help with chores. Everyone has a role, and time is precious. The apprentice smith wipes soot from his face, his hands already blistered. The baker stokes the oven embers, preparing for the day's bread. The weaver tightens threads on her loom, eyes fixed on the pattern. You join the chorus, stepping into your assigned task. Maybe you're a thatcher, climbing precariously onto a roof to replace straw before rain turns it into a soggy mess. Maybe you're a spinner, fingers nimble despite morning stiffness. The air is crisp, the earth damp beneath your boots. You smell smoke, wood, sweat, and fresh hay, a perfume few modern noses would appreciate. You remind yourself that despite the discomfort, this life is your normal. Still, the morning is filled with peculiar rituals. For example, some craftsmen believe that starting work before the rooster crows is bad luck. Others swear by specific prayers to Saint Crispin or Saint Eligius for a good day's labor. Superstition blends with faith seamlessly here. You also hear children's laughter, tempered by admonishments from parents. Kids are tasked with fetching water, feeding animals, or gathering firewood. Their energy contrasts with the wary adults who remember well the price of slacking. As you work, the sun continues its slow ascent, promising warmth but also relentless hours. You pause briefly, wiping sweat from your brow, and notice the roughness of your hands, calloused, stained, but capable. Medieval labor is unforgiving, and morning is just the opening act. And yet, amidst the toil, there is a rhythm, a community, a strange sort of poetry. You share glances with fellow workers, you trade small jokes and complaints, you exchange nods that say, "We're in this together." Remember that cold stone floor you stepped on earlier? It's long forgotten under the warmth of movement and purpose. But just as you start to feel steady, you remember, you're not done with the morning yet. You still have to dress properly before the sun fully rises. And that, dear listener, is an ordeal all its own. You stand back from your task, feeling the chill in the morning air wrap around your body like an uninvited guest. It's time to tackle what might be the most frustrating part of the day, dressing. In the modern world, throwing on clothes is often a mindless habit. Back then, it was a multi-layered performance that required patience, dexterity, and the occasional prayer for relief. Your medieval wardrobe isn't a minimalist capsule collection. It's a labyrinth of woolen tunics, lion shirts, leather belts, heavy hose, and, depending on your status, cloaks, coifs, and hoods. Each piece serves a purpose: warmth, modesty, or social signaling. But none of them come easy. You start with your chemise of linen undergarment, scratchy, but necessary to keep sweat and dirt off your outer layers. It's like wearing a burlap sack, but with more awkward folds. You tug it over your head, careful not to snag it on the wooden beams above. Next comes the tunic, the primary outer garment. This is your armor against the elements, made of thick wool dyed in whatever color your village could afford. Dark colors were common because bright dyes were expensive and faded fast. This tunic is often knee-length for men, longer for women. You wrestle the garment over your head, arms battling sleeves that feel like small constrictors. Buttons are scarce, so your tunic fastens with ties or clasps. You tie the sides carefully to avoid a wardrobe malfunction that could make your neighbors gossip for weeks. Now for your hose, basically medieval leggings made of woven wool or linen. These are pulled on like tights, but they're far from the elastic comfort you enjoy today. They're itchy, tight, and prone to slipping. You might need help lacing them to your belt or securing them with garters. Shoes are next, leather and stiff, often with pointed toes that look like you're trying to pick up small animals with your feet. They're worn thin at the soles and have been patched more times than you can count. Ladies might add an additional layer, a long gown or kirtle, sometimes with sleeves so tight they require help from a family member to get on. Headwear is essential. You wrap your wimple or coif tightly, pinning stray hairs away from your face. Men pull on their caps or hoods, shielding against the cold and the gossip. All this takes time. Dressing for a medieval morning isn't a quick shuffle. It's a deliberate process, requiring balance, flexibility, and occasional assistance. One wrong move, and you risk tearing your garments, exposing more than intended, or looking like a fool. You pause for a moment to catch your breath, adjusting your belt, and tugging at the sleeves. Your hands itch from yesterday's labor, your muscles complain about this new challenge, and your patience is running thin. The neighbors begin to stir, and you know that no matter how slow or awkward you feel, you're expected outside soon looking presentable, no less. There's no business casual here, it's all or nothing. Your clothing broadcasts your identity, your class, your trade, your marital status. It's a walking resume, stamped in wool and leather. And while you wrestle your tunic back into shape, you remember, despite the layers and the chill, this is the armor you have for facing a day full of mud, sweat, and uncertain fortunes. In the distance, the church bell rings again, its toll echoing off the village walls like a ticking clock. Your morning isn't over yet. You finally stumble into the kitchen or what passes for one in your humble abode where the lingering scent of last night's stew mingles with the ever-present smell of smoke and damp straw. The hearth is your centerpiece, the village's heartbeat, and the source of your modest morning meal. Breakfast, medieval style, is less a feast and more a functional necessity. A crust of rye bread, a few sips of thin ale or small beer, and if fortune favors you, some leftover pottage of thick porridge of grains and vegetables. Meat is a luxury, reserved mostly for feast days or the wealthy. You bite into your bread, the texture dense and unforgiving, crumbs scattering like little medieval snowflakes. It's filling, if not particularly tasty. You wash it down with a sip of ale, which, despite its watery nature, feels like a small comfort against the cold. If you're lucky, your household has access to some cheese or dried fruits. Herbs like parsley or dill might be sprinkled into your porridge to mask the dullness. But don't expect cinnamon rolls or anything fancy. Sugar is rare and expensive. For the children in your home, breakfast is often simpler, sometimes just a sip of ale or a bite of bread before heading off to work or, if they're lucky, to a rudimentary school. Education isn't a guaranteed privilege, but the mornings are a time of gathering strength. Outside, the village noises rise, carts creaking, animals calling, the murmur of neighbors exchanging greetings or complaints about the weather. Medieval cookery was all about making the most of limited resources. Bread might be baked once a week in a communal oven, meaning stale slices are a morning staple. Soups and stews simmered slowly, flavored with whatever was at hand: onions, leeks, cabbage, sometimes a bone or two. Historians still debate how widespread the use of spices was among peasants. While the nobility lavished their tables with exotic flavors like cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, common folk mostly stuck to what grew nearby. You chew thoughtfully, savoring the small ritual. Breakfast might be humble, but it's your launchpad for a day filled with toil and duty. As you eat, you cast a glance outside, noticing the way the light softens the thatched roofs and illuminates the muddy streets. This world is harsh, but it is yours. Soon, you'll be back out, shoulders hunched against the cold, fingers raw from work, but for now, you allow yourself a moment of warmth by the fire. And with the last bite swallowed, you ready yourself for what's next, facing the unpredictable weather and the demands of the day. You step outside again, the brisk morning air hitting your face like a slap, reminding you that medieval mornings spare no one. The sky is a wash of gray, promising rain or worse, and there's mud everywhere, thick, sticky mud that clings to your boots and weighs down each step. The village lanes are more like rivers of dirt than paths, and if you're unlucky, you might lose a shoe in a particularly deep puddle. Again, there's no forecast app to prepare you for this, just your own experience and a prayer to the weather gods. Medieval people had their own ways of reading signs, the shape of clouds, the behavior of animals, the smell of the air. Farmers watch the sky constantly, knowing that a day of rain could mean lost crops or flooded fields. Weather was more than an inconvenience, it was a life or death factor. A harsh winter, a dry summer, or an unexpected storm could spell disaster for entire communities. Food scarcity, illness, even death often followed poor weather. So, each morning, you brace yourself. Your clothes cling damply to your skin. The wool is heavy, the leather stiff and cold. You shuffle through the village, greeting neighbors with tired nods. Some carry bundles of firewood, others herd animals to pasture. Children splash through puddles, their laughter a brief reprieve from the day's hardship. You notice a group gathered near the well, exchanging news. Word travels fast: hair gossip, market prices, the latest disputes. In a world without phones or newspapers, face-to-face talk is everything. You remember the last storm, how the river nearly overflowed, how your neighbor's barn lost its roof. The weather keeps you humble. Despite all this, you push on. You have chores waiting, repairing fences, tending animals, preparing tools. The village depends on each person playing their part. If you're a craftsman, your workshop awaits the scent of wood shavings and metal filings mixing with the morning air. If you're a merchant, carts must be loaded and goods accounted for before the market opens. If you're a farmer, fields beckon with their endless labor. Your body protests ashes, chills, the dull throb of exhaustion from too many mornings like this. But survival demands resilience. As you navigate the uneven streets, you spot a neighbor struggling with a stubborn cart wheel stuck in the mud. You lend a hand, knowing that cooperation is vital. The bells toll once again, a constant reminder of time passing and duties calling. You remind yourself that the weather, while merciless, is part of a cycle. Life depends on it, even when it's against you. In this moment, as you trudge through the mud, you appreciate the small things, a dry cloak, a kind smile, a steady pair of hands. And yet, the day's challenges are just beginning. The morning stretches on, and with it come the inevitable chores that claim your every waking moment. If you're a parent or lucky enough to be a favored apprentice, you're responsible for a host of tasks before the sun reaches its zenith. Children, barely awake, scramble after chickens, fetch water, or carry bundles of firewood to the hearth. It's a whirlwind of small, necessary duties that teach responsibility as much as exhaustion. Kids might complain, but their laughter echoes through the village, a reminder that life, despite hardship, persists with stubborn cheerfulness. Apprentices, on the other hand, are thrust into the thick of work early. Whether it's hammering horseshoes in the blacksmith's forge or kneading dough in the bakery, their mornings are marked by relentless effort and the watchful eyes of masters who expect perfection. Your muscles itch already, a dull protest against the day's labors. The back-breaking work is made harder by the lingering chill and the stiff clothes you wrestled into this morning. Blisters form quickly, calluses thicken. But you press on. The village animals are part of this daily ritual. Feeding the pigs, milking the goats, and coaxing cows into their stalls are tasks requiring patience and care. You learn the moods of each beast: the stubborn mule, the skittish sheep, the bossy hen, and you adjust accordingly. Chores are a team effort. Families and neighbors often band together, sharing tools and labor in a communal dance of survival. Historically, this sense of community was vital. Villages functioned like extended families, with everyone contributing according to ability. Children learned skills by watching and helping adults, knowledge passed orally through work, and through shared stories. The hours blur. The sun climbs, sweat beads on your brow, and the itch in your limbs deepens. Yes, there is pride in productivity, no matter how humble the task. Sometimes, midday brought a brief respite of perhaps a hunk of bread, a swig of ale, or a quiet moment to rest, but the work never truly stopped. Remember that biting cold floor from your first steps this morning. By now, your feet are roughened, your back sore, and your spirit taxed. But you're part of a chain that holds the village together. And if you're lucky, you might catch a few moments to enjoy a laugh, a shared joke, or a story from an elder. The morning might be relentless, but it's also alive with human connection, something no amount of discomfort can erase. With the bells tolling once more, you prepare for the next challenge of your day, knowing the medieval morning is only half over. You might think the nobility had it easy, wrapped in furs and silk while peasants shivered in their threadbare tunics. But medieval mornings for the rich came with their own unique brand of misery. While peasants wrestled with mud and cold floors, nobles contended with layers of clothing, complicated rituals, and beauty treatments that were anything but comfortable. The nobleman's morning begins with a parade of servants attending to his every need. But even this royal wake-up call isn't gentle. The chamberlain pulls back heavy velvet curtains, exposing the lord to the chill morning air. No cozy blankets here. The nobles believed fresh air was good for the constitution, even if it felt like a personal attack. Washing was more elaborate. Nobles bathed in large tubs, sometimes perfumed with rose water and herbs, but the water was cold by modern standards. Bathing was both a luxury and a ritual, often followed by hours of dressing in stiff, heavy garments. The wardrobe of a noble included multiple layers: lion shirts, silk or wool doublets, hose, stockings, leather boots, and elaborate outer garments adorned with embroidery and jewels. Putting on these clothes was an ordeal requiring at least one servant's help and patience. Buttons and laces were everywhere, and the fabrics were heavy and hot despite the morning chill. Beauty routines included applying lead-based face powders, which were fashionable but toxic, a trade-off for pale skin considered the height of aristocratic elegance. Hairstyles were elaborate and required hours of attention. Nobles often began their day with a light meal, porridge or bread, and wine, though feasts awaited later. They might also read or engage in prayers, but their mornings were as structured by etiquette as by religion. Despite the privilege, the noble morning was exhausting in its own right, a far cry from the leisurely life some imagine. Still, whether lord or laborer, the medieval morning was defined by discipline, ritual, and a constant negotiation with discomfort. You take a deep breath and remind yourself, no matter your station, everyone faced challenges at dawn. The bells toll again, marking the passage of time and the next phase of your day. The steady tolling of bells is more than a spiritual cue, it's the soundtrack of your day, slicing time into neat, unforgiving segments. From dawn until noon, the bells ring to call prayers, mark work periods, and announce important village events. Sometimes, they sound as many as 8 times before midday, each peal pushing you along like a relentless metronome. In monasteries, bells dictated the canonical hours, signaling monks when to pause their work and recite prayers. These bells were massive, forged in iron and bronze, and their echoes carried for miles. For villagers, the bells also marked the rhythm of daily life. Work began and ended with their ringing. Markets opened. Meals were served. Errands had to be run before the next chime. You might hear the bell toll as you're in the middle of a task, mending a fence, carrying water, or tending animals, and you have to stop abruptly, moving like a clockwork automaton. There's little room for dawdling. The bell system was so embedded in life that missing it, toll could mean missing an important event or worse, appearing disrespectful or lazy. Some villages had a dedicated bell ringer, often a young boy or elder charged with climbing the tower and pulling the heavy ropes. It was dangerous work, especially in bad weather. Interestingly, historians debate whether the ringing schedule was strictly followed by peasants or if it was more of a guideline. Some evidence suggests flexibility, others point to the social pressure that kept everyone in line. You glance up at the bell tower, its silhouette dark against the morning sky. The next toll is imminent. Your world ticks forward with each clang. You're part of a community bound by sound, by shared labor, and by the unyielding march of time. It's a comforting and cruel reminder that life waits for no one. As you listen to the bells fade into the distance, you prepare yourself for the next task, facing a day without the modern comforts you take for granted like coffee. You find yourself craving something warm and comforting, but instead of a rich coffee or fragrant tea, you get boiled oats or gruel, watery, bland, and served lukewarm in a simple wooden bowl. This is your medieval caffeine substitute, hearty, filling, but hardly a pick-me-up. Coffee didn't make its way into Europe until the 17th century, and tea arrived even later. So, in the Middle Ages, your morning beverage options were limited to ale, wine diluted with water, or these humble porridges. Oats, barley, or rye were the grains of choice. They were cooked slowly over the hearth to make a porridge thick enough to be eaten with a spoon or, if you're lucky, with your fingers. You try not to grimace at the texture. The porridge is often gritty, sometimes laced with bits of old bread or vegetables, but it's warm and keeps the hunger pangs at bay. For the wealthy, breakfast could include sweetened dishes flavored with honey, dried fruits, or spices. But for common folk, the meal is practical and plain. The lack of modern stimulants makes the early hours especially challenging. Fatigue creeps in, and your body itches from the cold and labor ahead. Still, medieval people found ways to manage. Fermented beverages like ale provided a mild buzz and some calories. Warm food was treasured. You take a bite, savoring the simple comfort. Outside, the day unfolds with a harsh beauty, muddy streets, glowing hearths, and the bustle of life. Your morning continues, without coffee, without comfort drinks, but with the resilience that only centuries of hardship can build. You're already tired, but the day demands more. By mid-morning, the exhaustion sets in like a heavy cloak you can't shrug off. Your muscles itch from the cold stone floors, the relentless chores, and the endless layers of rough clothing. Your back feels stiff, your hands cracked and sore. The dust and dirt of the village cling to your skin, and you notice that your shoes, if they're still on your feet, have been stolen by the pigs once again. Those pesky creatures have a habit of wandering into your yard and making off with anything not nailed down, especially footwear. You sigh, half amused, half frustrated. The day's struggles have already piled up, and it's only mid-morning. Despite the hardships, there's a strange rhythm to it all. You survived the cold floor, the communal privy, the freezing wash water, and the scratchy clothes. You've prayed your prayers, eaten your humble meal, and faced the merciless weather. The relentless ringing of bells has marked your every move. Yet, beneath it all, you feel a quiet pride. This routine, though harsh and unforgiving, is the backbone of a world that has endured centuries of struggle. It's a testament to human resiliency, morning ritual you might never want to experience again but somehow respect deeply. As you prepare for the next stage of your day, you take a deep breath, feeling the chill fade slightly as the sun rises higher. The village is alive with movement, noise, and the persistent pulse of life. And you're already exhausted but still standing. Now, take a moment to settle in, breathe deeply, and let the weight of the medieval morning drift away like a distant memory. Rest now, knowing you braved a dawn that few today would dare face. Let the quiet of the evening soothe your mind. Tomorrow is another day, but tonight sweet dreams. Now, as the day gently fades into night, imagine yourself sinking into a soft bed far removed from the straw and cold stone you woke upon. The air is warm and still, a gentle hush filling the room like a lullaby. Feel the tension in your muscles slowly melt away, your breath deepening, steadying. The sun's harsh light is replaced by the soothing glow of moonlight filtering through your window, casting soft shadows that dance like whispers on the walls. Let your mind drift to a place where time moves slower, where the itches and discomforts of the day no longer hold sway. Imagine the gentle caress of a cool breeze, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and fresh herbs. With each breath, your body grows heavier, sinking deeper into peaceful rest. The worries of the medieval morning, chill floors, scratchy clothes, relentless bells fade into the background, replaced by warmth, comfort, and calm. Allow yourself to let go completely, to be carried away by the soft embrace of sleep, where dreams are free from hardship and full of quiet wonder. May this calm fill your heart and soothe your soul, carrying you gently through the night until dawn's first light. Rest well, dear friend. Tomorrow awaits, but for now sleep.